This is 7 instructions for how to speak with the devil, which, as those of you with any sort of brains at all might know, this is a patently moronic proposition on the face of it, one likely to communicate in any number of fairly unpleasant fate. Honestly, it would probably be smart to publish your credit card number on Facebook or take up a career in crocodile wrestling. But then that isn't going to stop you, is it? Not if you're sincerely interested, at least. Technically, if you do everything just right, there's a fair chance you'll walk away scot-free, and that seems to be reason enough for some people to decide that is a good idea, especially if you're the fate-tempting, thrill-seeking, scared junkie type, or the desperate type. Which brings me to a point of clarification I want to make. This is not a manual for making any kind of Faustian bargain, you know, the whole sell your soul type of deal. Although if you happen to bring it up in conversation, he will certainly wouldn't be the one to refuse. Following through with such foolhardy bargain, however, would necessitate removing some of the protections in which you will put in place for your conversation. I don't think I need to spell out for you why that would be a bad idea. If you're really mathematically impaired enough to want to trade something that will last an infinite number of years for something that might last about 90 tops, there are plenty of other rituals out there for you to follow. This one, if performed correctly, should only allow the two of you to talk. This perhaps begs the question of why exactly you want to speak with the devil in the first place. Maybe some of you just like the idea of making small talk with extremely dangerous occult entities. But for the sake of the human race, I hope most of you aren't quite that stupid. Short answer is he knows things some of you might have a deep vested interest in finding out. I mean, he's not the omniscient or anything, much as he'd like to pretend otherwise. He's not God, but he definitely got a supernatural advantage over the kind of knowledge any human would be able to obtain. For example, he probably won't be able to predict when the next world war will happen or tell you the cure for cancer, but he very well able to predict the winning numbers of tomorrow's 500 million Powerball drawing or tell you what deadly undiagnosed condition might be afflicting one of your loved ones. Of course, the Prince of Darkness doesn't go around giving away winning lottery numbers to anybody who asks and trusting any sort of information obtained from being commonly described as the father of all lies. Is liable to land you in a worse situation than you were already when you started. However, if you're really dead set on finding out something and you exhausted all other options, there is a way to try to get accurate information out of the guy. You see, like so many more urban villains of popular culture, the devil has a bit of a penchant for games and gambling. Of course, the reason he likes him so much is he almost always wins. Unless he happens to be a fiddler named Johnny or being represented by Daniel Webster, you'll probably get your ass handed to you. But if you're determined enough to want to face the risk in the long odds, there are certain games of the two you could play to try to win the information you need. First things first though, we'll start with a description of summoning process, then get into the rules of the game. Some tips for how to play it, and finally of course the inevitable lineage of arcane shit that might go horribly wrong. In order to contact your conversational partner, you'll need to get to a church at midnight. It doesn't matter what kind of church, large or small, old or new, liberal or conservative, just as long as you're sure it'll be empty. The last thing you want for some preacher to walk in on you while you're in the middle of this, for the sake of the preacher's well-being as much as your own. The process will probably work best if you try it on a new moon or full moon, Friday the 13th or Halloween. The actual day is less important than the psychological effect it has on you. As long as you don't try on Christmas Eve or some stupid shit like that, you should be fine. The time is important though. You don't have to start or end your ritual exactly at 12 a.m. and Greenwich atomic time or anything. But a general rule of thumb, you ought to show up a bit before midnight and have everything set up no later than 10 or 15 after. Show up a lot before midnight if you don't know how you're going to get in. Shockingly enough, most houses of God do tend to lock their doors at night, at least if no one's there to watch over them. And remember, be want empty. Got it? There are of course certain things you need to bring and certain things you can't bring. For this ritual, you will need a full can of salt. You don't need to use all of it, but it's always better to have more than you need than to have less. 7 candles or red or white being preferable. Something to light the candles with. You'll be shocked how often people forget this. Occult ritual or not, they're not going to magically light themselves. A full-length red string, rope, yarn, or thread. A full-length floor or wall mirror. Ideally, you want to find one of these already present in the church. They're a bit unwieldy to be lugging around with you during a break-in. However, if there really aren't any there, you have to bring your own. And you might also find it useful to bring some markers, pencils, paper, a flashlight, and any sort of tool that might be necessary to secure your entrance to the church. You will not be permitted to bring any electronic or timekeeping devices. This includes all cell phones, smartphones, tablets, e-readers, MP3 players, PDA, calculators, wristwatches, pocket watches, kitchen timers, hourglasses, etc., etc., etc. Seriously, it's worse than the SAT. If you're one of those people who has your smartphone practically wired into your brain, don't worry. You can bring those things with you to church as long as you leave them outside the room, which you'll be doing the ritual. If you brought a flashlight, helpful for finding your way around without attracting unwanted attention, leave that outside too. Also, don't bring any sort of religious paraphernalia to protect you, especially pertains to Abrahamic religions. And yes, if those gothy black cross earrings you're wearing are hanging right side up, they count. If you have any kind of holy symbol like that with you, the devil will simply refuse to show up. Don't worry, you're not going to be going in totally unprotected. In fact, most of the plans with you are not for any sort of devil summoning ritual, but for your own protection, all superstitions and folk magic remedies to guard oneself from evil. From what I know of it, the effect most likely based on the power of belief, so there are probably numerous other objects, artifacts, and procedures that work just as well. If you like to risk being left helpless at the mercy of the devil in order to test that theory, feel free to experiment. However, for anyone without psychotic death wish, I recommend sticking to rituals as follows. Once you're sure you have all the right supplies with you, make your way into the church and find some place to set up. It could be anywhere from the main sanctuary where the services are held, to a Sunday school classroom, to a walk-in supply closet. As long as you have sufficient amount of open floor and space are certain not to be disturbed. Set up your mirror first. This is where the devil will appear when you summon him. Such as you mustn't complete the summoning until you lay down certain wards around it. First, surround the mirror with an unbroken circle of salt. If the mirror hanging on the wall or door, lay down a semicircle around it instead. Make sure the salt touches the wall at both ends. Then wrap your red string around the mirror several times. The color red, especially red string, is symbolic of protection in the folklore of many cultures and religions. This is why red candles are a good idea. Speaking of the candles, set them up around the outside of your circle or semicircle of salt, spaced at relatively even intervals. No, you do not have to get out measuring tape and make it exactly perfect, but do at least try to make it look though as it was set by someone old enough to be trusted with matches. Light the candles in a clockwise fashion. Be careful not to disturb the salt. If you break the circle, you have to start all over again. Once all the candles are lit and burning strongly, your protective ward are complete. Now you're ready to proceed to actual summoning. To do so, you must first get the devil's attention and demonstrate your resolve by performing some sort of sacrilegious act in the holy space. Turning a crucifix or a cross upside down is fairly conventional, but it's not the only option. For example, I know a kid who once fulfilled this requirement by scribbling obnoxious graffiti all over a painting of Jesus hanging on his Sunday school classroom. The nice thing about turning a cross upside down is once you finish your counter, assuming you survived in one piece, you can flip it right side up again and no one the wiser. Sidestepping a revelatory minor is still irritating to risk having your Sunday school turn into a reenactment of the Spanish Inquisition for the next month and a half. After you finish doing whatever offensive thing you decided on, shut all doors to the room and turn off all the lights so that space is lit only by the candles. Face the mirror and stare deeply into it, concentrating on your desired outcome. There are no incantation, no arcane strings of Latin you have to recite. Just look into the mirror and wish as hard as you can for the devil to appear there. After a few moments of this, when you feel ready, close your eyes and count to 10, then open them. If all has gone correctly, you will no longer see your own reflection. You'll be looking at the devil, or at least looking the way the devil has chosen to appear to you. Chances are he won't look like a conventional red horned demon with goat legs and a pitchfork, nor any other sort of terrible apparition. No point in scaring you off now, better to lure you in, make you feel safe. To the end, he generally takes on the appearance of a fairly average, nondescript human being. If anything, he's prone to vanity and will lean towards the more attractive end of the spectrum. The only real frightening part of him will be his eyes. No matter how hard he tries, he can't hide the sinister gleam smoldering deep within them. The malevolent amusement and hunger, like the eyes of fire contemplating a fly struggling in its web. They're supremely confident, those eyes, confident without pity. Don't look into them too deeply or begin to feel helpless and paralyzed with the dread, losing your hope and will to fight. Since you'll probably just be standing there staring him in shock for a few moments, having some level expected for the ritual to fail, he initiates the conversation by asking you what is desired from him. If you gather your wits enough to string together a coherent sentence, you should respond with something like this. I wish to challenge you in a game of question and response. If you don't get the words exactly right, he'll know what you mean, and he'll accept your request with a wide pictorial grin of anticipation. He's been playing this game for a long time, and you see he's very good at it. Most humans, on the other hand, are very bad at it. This gives him a chance to, at the very least, thoroughly mess with your mind, and most will save the time for the lunatic of shit that could go wrong. You have to play it very smart to avoid justifying his expectations. The general rules to this game are very simple, with a few caveats that can make things more complicated. He'll begin to ask you a question. He always initiates the game. It could be anything from a piece of obscure trivia to a riddle to an extremely personal inquiry. Don't worry, you won't be immediately plunged into hell if you get a wrong answer or anything like that. As a matter of fact, he won't even tell you whether you got the answer right or wrong. After you answer his question, you get to ask him one in return. Now, here's where the consequences of your response come in. If you answer his last question correctly, he will respond to your question as honestly and accurately as he is able. However, if you answer it incorrectly, he is free to lie to you as he sees fit. Perhaps if you ask him something you're better off not knowing, he'll tell you the truth about it anyway. More likely, he'll feel the response most insidious, damaging lie he could come up with. Either way, after he responded, he'll ask you another question, and process will repeat over and over again until you decide to call it quits. Now, you may be sitting there thinking it sounds fairly easy to get the information you need, and all you have to do is wait for the questions you can answer correctly, and then take the opportunity to ask him what you really want to know, ignoring everything else he said. Well, it's not that simple. The devil will never give you an easy question, one that can be completely sure to answer to. He may instead give you questions that you may have some vague knowledge of, that you think you maybe know the answer but aren't really confident, thus forcing you to endlessly second guess yourself, obsessing over whether or not you can find the trusted information that he gave you next. Perhaps you'll think that what he said was a lie, wish it was a lie, but internally consumed by doubt, unable to convince yourself that you were wrong, or perhaps that you have to make a huge choice based on the information that he gave you, and be tormented by fear and indecisiveness as you realize your fate, and perhaps that of others as well. Thus, entirely upon you whether or not you were able to correctly recall some arcane piece of trivia that you don't remember now. You'll never remember the exact question the devil asked you, by the way. That will make it too easy for you to go back and check your responses. Or maybe, testing your knowledge, he'll ask you something personal, something you even lied to yourself about. You answer it back to him, thinking you got the question correct. No, I don't resent my sister. Yes, I will turn the money into the police. But he'll know better. He knows that you do that, you're lying. He'll lie to you in return. And you'll believe him. You'll believe him until you're no longer able to deceive yourself, and by then it might be too late. Or maybe he just won't even give you a chance to accurate response at all. Maybe he'll just ask you endless strings of completely impossible questions, making you more and more frustrated and disheartened as you realize you'll never be able to force him to tell you the truth. Questions like, what is the exact time of Mount Everest in centimeters in the year 1666? Or, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Although, knowing his sense of humor, if he ever asked the latter, he might consider African or European a correct response. There are a couple of ways to short-circuit this particular strategy, however. Additional rules and courses of action that make the game more interesting and prevent you from being stonewalled completely. Although, in all honesty, he probably wants you to try one of these options anyway. The first option is to ask him a riddle instead of a question. If you somehow manage to stump him and he answers the riddle wrong or gives up, he'll be obligated to give you a truthful response in your next question. If he answers the riddle correctly once again, don't worry, he won't pounce on you like a sphinx and drag you into hell. What will happen is that he'll get a pass, allowing him to lie in response to one of the questions you'd otherwise be obligated to answer truthfully. Honestly, if he gets a pass, you might as well just give up and quit the game right there. It's very possible to determine when he's telling you the truth under the best conditions. Adding another layer of complexity by constantly trying to figure out when and if he's used his pass is about enough to make any normal person's brain explode. There's no way, just forget it. The second option is for you to take a dare from him. If you accept it and vow to follow through, then once again he'll have to answer your next question truthfully. If you chose to reject it, he'll get another pass. Now, before you freak out and reject the whole idea completely, you should know that he won't ask you to do anything overly dramatic or unspeakably evil, like blow up a hospital or murder somebody. As a rule of thumb, most dares won't involve direct loss of life or any major felonies. However, they certainly won't be easy. Inflicting severe pain on yourself, doing something that terrifies the shit out of you, cutting off a treasured relationship, publicly humiliating yourself, or someone you love. All those things and more, things you that might not be able to imagine, are completely on this table. If you're willing to go that far, put yourself in that kind of position, you'll get your answer. However, if he manages to come up with the one thing that you know you simply can't or won't do, well, once again, you might as well quit. One last thing, don't think that you can tell him that you're going to do something and then not do it. If you accept the dare and don't follow through it, well, let's just say there will be consequences. Just suck it up, keep your promise no matter what it was. Trust me, you're better off that way. Finally, when you either got the information you wanted or give it up on it completely, you may end the ritual by simply thanking the devil for accepting your request, bowing politely at the waist, bidding him farewell. The surface of the mirror will seem to swim and flicker on for a moment, then you'll be looking at your own reflection again. Only when you're able to absolutely certain that you look into your own two eyes again may you turn away from the mirror. Flick the lights back on and begin dismantling your protections. Now, this is important. Even if you haven't gotten the information that you wanted, you must end the ritual in the manner before 66 minutes have elapsed. Well, I suppose that technically you have 66 minutes and 6 seconds, subtle, right? But if you're seriously going to try to cut that close without any kind of timekeeping device, you're probably screwed anyway. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you keep to this time limit. I'll save the reasons behind that for the end, but don't skip ahead. I still got a few important tips on how to play. 1. Be very careful what sort of personal information you give out. Try not to talk about yourself, especially your emotions and problems, any more than absolutely necessary. This guy knows human physiologically like the back of his hand, and he will get inside your head. It's like talking to a Hannibal Lecter. Give him enough worked with, and even if you don't believe a single word he says, he'll still find ways to fuck with your mind and like nobody's business. And if anything he asks makes you even remotely uncomfortable, do not hesitate to lie through your teeth. There will be plenty of other questions. On a similar note, try to keep the game on track and moving briskly. Unstructured interactions of any kind are to be avoided. Chances are at some point he will try to draw you off a tangent, discussing something that fascinates you, analyzing a response you've given him, or finding some other excuse to speak at a length without moving the game forward. This is not only a waste of valuable time, but also an excellent opportunity to mess with your mind. 3. If you choose to give him a riddle, use one you made up yourself. If the riddle has ever been written down anywhere at all, from pages of The Hobbit to some long-lost tomb of ancient magic, you already know the answer. That said, it still has to be a legitimate riddle, with an answer that makes logical sense from some angle. You can't ask some like, what's green has 10 legs and hops, then claim for some inexplicable reason that the answer was given marshmallows, nor can you ask him a straight question like, what I have got in my pocket. He probably knows that anyway. There are no hard and fast rules to determine whether a riddle makes sense or not. But you're a reasonable human being, and your ancestors ate from the tree of knowledge. Please, for the love of crap, use common sense. 4. If you choose to take a dare, there are slight chances that the devil will ask you to do something seemingly easy. Deliver a letter, for instance, or scribble 10-digit number in public restroom stall. If he does ask you for something like this, and you even should have common sense, common decency, and you do not accept, chances are he's using you to further some sinister plot. One libel ruins a lot of lives and harm a lot of people. Who knows? Maybe you're the type of person who really doesn't mind throwing an unknown number of total strangers under a bus to find out what you want to know. But at least be aware that that is what you're doing. 5. Last but not least, be very aware of the time. It might be helpful to do some practicing beforehand, get a feel how long an hour is without the watch. The devil will probably put off discussing things that you're most keen to find out for as long as he can, and you near the 66-minute deadline. He'll start trying harder and harder to distract you, captivate you, and otherwise keep you playing until it's too late. He'll string you along, feed you little glimmers of false hope, keep you thinking just a few more minutes. I'm almost there. Don't fall for it. Don't go over the time limit, no matter what. 9. You might be thinking that the game really doesn't sound all that dangerous so far. Threats of physiological damage rarely seem to carry the same weight as threats of physical damage, even though their costs are often just as great. Hate to burst your bubble, but the game is far from safe. There are plenty of ways for you to seriously screw yourself over, both physically and mentally, not to mention spiritually. And it is with these I will conclude, in the vein of hope that they make some sort of impression. That's why you're speaking with the devil. Do not let him out of your sight. Keep staring to the mirror no matter what happens. He will undoubtedly try various tricks to make you look away. You will hear noises behind you, feel eyes on the back of your neck, see shadowy phantoms writhing in the depths of the mirror. A cold breath will blow upon you from behind, smelling like the crypt. Deep silence will settle, only to be interrupted by a loud smack directly behind your head, giving about the worst jump scare of your head. Hell, the devil even may be abandoning a measure of own dignified facade and give you a sudden jump of the faint shock, shouting loudly and pointing behind you with a very convincing look of terror on his face. What might he test you with? You must not look away from him. If you look away, you lose sight of him completely. Even for 1 second, you will look back in the mirror to find him gone. Well, not gone, out of the mirror, in the room, with you. Exactly how much of your body the police will find the next morning and what state is in it depending entirely on the sort of mood he's in. The same thing goes if you break any of the protections you laid down before, beginning the ritual, interrupting the circle of salt, letting the red string unwind, knocking over a candle, or letting one go out. Any of these things will free him from the mirror, and then, well, you're a bunch of creative horror junkies. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. On a different topic, you may reach a point in the game, probably after a long series of maddeningly impossible questions, where the devil asks you the specifically simple question: what is your full name? You must not give it to him. Names can be the things of great power, although the devil will, of course, already know your name. Telling it to him yourself is akin to inviting a vampire into your home. Your name is deeply synonymous with your own inner self, thus giving him your name is probably symbolic of him giving him yourself. If you are foolish enough to make this mistake, all your protections will be naught, and he will seize upon your unwitting offer with malicious glee, stealing away your soul and dragging it back to hell with him back into hell. At least this way the police will find a complete identifiable body. As a matter of fact, your vacant shell will be totally unblemished, seemingly have dropped dead of sheer terror. Last but certainly not least, there matter of what happens if you go over the time limit. This is arguably the worst thing you can do. Don't think that so first. The devil will give you no indication that you have in fact exceeded the time limit, and you will conclude the rituals as nothing gone wrong. Perhaps the devil's image in the mirror trembles and gives you away. You will see a particularly nasty triumphant smirk flash across his face, but this will be easily dismissed as your imagination. You turn the lights on, gather your belongings, go to leave the room. When you open the door, you will see nothing. That's right, nothing. A flat white void extending infinity in all directions. Only the room which is reflected in the mirror will now exist. Incidentally, if you turn back around to face the mirror again, you may catch a last glimpse of your own reflection. Perhaps it'll even turn a favor you with a smirk and a cheeky way before sweeping out into the door at the perfectly normal church hallway outside. As you may already figure out, you yourself are no longer in the church. Your soul is now trapped in the mirror, and the devil has taken the liberty of possessing your body, now that you're no longer using it. Pound on the glass, scream all you like, but you'll never get out on your own. At least no exorcist can help you. But don't worry, it's not like you're in hell, right? At least not necessarily. What you have to understand is that, see, a human soul stripped of bare of its flesh is a deeply violent and vulnerable thing, especially when trapped in the land of the living. Now you are an entity of purely mental properties, and as such, the barriers between what is real to you and what is imaginary have been completely dissolved. As you fill the reflective room with your anger, your sorrow, your fear have been trapped. These emotions begin to coalesce, given form by your mind. If you're not particularly imaginative, these creatures may not be too terrible, may not be able to inflict too much horror and pain. With time, you may be able to teach yourself to get rid of them. If, however, your mind is haunted by monsters, a mind that is verbally creative and imaginative, more than usually twisted, well, there's no telling what horrors might come clawing your way out of the maelstrom. Tasting sweet release from the confines of your subconsciousness, hungering for your terror and suffering, they will refuse to be banished, dragging you kicking and screaming into an endless positive feedback loop of pain and fear. Needless to say, if you're a regular patron of websites like this one, you're probably pretty well fucked. There's only one way to find release from the mirror and the world that you created therein. They're saying that if you call the devil once more to ask him to free you from the mirror, he'll be willing to take you out, for the usual fee, of course. Who knows? Maybe if your imagination is twisted and powerful enough to create a personal hell that leaves you begging for the real thing, those sounds might well be put to good use. There are over 7 billion people in the world. After all, even the devil himself can't be messing with all their minds at once. Talented help is always appreciated. Of course, the corollary to you being trapped inside the mirror is that the devil now gets to do whatever he wants with your body until sunrise. And around that time, your body will mercifully drop dead from the strain of the possession. Autopsy would probably be identified the cause of some kind of covalent event. Don't get too relieved, although he's perfectly capable of stirring up plenty of trouble in those few hours. For instance, he may decide to do something big and dramatic, like purchase a large meat cleaver and go on a murder spree, starting with the names in your address book and work your way out to complete strangers if he has time. Or perhaps he'll focus on only one person, someone who trusts you completely, using your persona to get him or her alone, verbal, and then, well, no one to describe it here. Once again, I'm sure you can think of a few things. Starting to see why I call this the worst outcome yet? Of course, there's a chance he won't lay a finger on any of your loved ones, instead of deciding to do something a little more subtle, more insidious, like drop off a few nondescript and unmarked packages on certain doorsteps in the dangerous part of town, or locate a particularly dusty AGL text in the storeroom of your local library and intentionally misfile in the young adults literature section, or whisper 7 very choice words into the ear of distracted young redhead waiting for the 3 a.m. subway train. Or maybe he'll decide that in this age of waning superstition, not enough people are getting interested in his game, and the knowledge of them is in danger of being lost. Maybe he'll decide that he needs to get the word out a bit more, do a bit more networking, attract some new suckers, challengers. Maybe he'll take a quick peek at your browser history, see where impressionable, curious minds are hanging out these days. Maybe he'll even write a quick tutorial in modern parlance rather than some inscrutable, obsolete, demonological text, post it on the internet and see how many bites he gets. Maybe I shouldn't have gone there, but if you made it this far without shining, a little twist at the end is going to put you off. Is it, dear reader? I'm sure there are plenty of intrepid adventures with you with a burning question you'd like to answer. And you're all a smart bunch. You know the pitfalls. You know the conventions. You live and breathe this sort of things. Do you not? There's no way you'd fall into the obvious traps, right? You're not some Dick or Jane off the street after all. You'll be bringing a whole new level of competition. You would. Excuse me just a moment. I think I hear someone calling for me. What? You wanted to get out that badly already? Must be one of those hell of imagination you got on you. Perfect.